Tonight we talk about Nero's palace of peculiar passions, his domus aurea, the golden house that once sprawled like an overindulgent daydream right across the heart of Rome. You stand there now, toes curled into marble so polished it feels like water underfoot, surrounded by walls gleaming with actual flakes of gold. Firelight flickers, and the ceilings seem to swallow the stars. This place hums with extravagance so intense you probably won't survive this without at least a mild case of envy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love seeing how far these sleepy adventures travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward, the palace breathing warmth and perfume. This is the entrance, no humble foyer, but an explosion of sensory dazzle meant to broadcast imperial supremacy. Nero commissioned this wonder after the Great Fire of 64 CE, a real historical event that leveled huge swaths of Rome and conveniently made room for his project. Historians still argue whether he took advantage of tragedy or more dramatically helped light the match. You glance at a fresco of Apollo, the sun god, serenading a crowd. Nero adored Apollo because he fancied himself a musician, too. Imagine if your boss declared they were a rock star and built a palace to prove it, just Roman emperor things. Your fingers trail a wall where pigments still glow in unnatural blues and reds. Whispering slaves hurry past, adjusting aromatic burners. The air tastes faintly of honey and myrrh. It's weirdly like walking through a luxury candle store, except this place doesn't have a checkout aisle or reasonable prices. Above you looms a rotunda dome, the one that once featured a revolving ceiling powered by hidden workers below. One mainstream historian described it as a celestial theater. You tilt your head back, half expecting the stars to twirl like a cosmic mobile. The rumor goes that Nero engineered a vent to rain flower petals and saffron mist onto his guests. A quirky bit of lore even suggests he accidentally smothered a few senators under botanical avalanches, an upbeat reminder that too much pampering can be hazardous. Your footsteps echo down a hallway lined with polished marble. The slabs feel cold despite the heavy torches, and the scent thickens: roses, wine, something strangely like fresh bread. The palace was infamous for piping in smells to set moods. If Rome had invented the plug-in air freshener, Nero would have owned stock. You pass an alcove of statues, self-portraits of the emperor wearing heroic costumes, charioteer, poet, even Hercules, the muscle-bound demigod. It's giving theater kid energy dialed up to divine status. Somewhere nearby, soft music trickles from a hidden chamber, lyres plucking like lazy raindrops. This is not a place made for quiet reflection. This is a palace that shouts, "Look at me," even while whispering, "Be impressed." A servant offers you a sip of wine from a golden cup, and you hesitate. Probably safe. You take one cautious taste, and yes, it's delightful, but also suspiciously strong. Another modern-day comparison. Imagine if someone tried to impress you by pouring an entire top-shelf bar into one drink. You set the cup down before your evening becomes tomorrow. As you continue deeper, shadows stretch like long black ribbons, wrapping the corridors. The luxury begins to feel thick, overwhelming, like the palace itself is studying you, deciding whether you belong. Historians still argue whether Nero genuinely sought to create beauty or simply drown the world in proof of his power. But tonight, none of that matters. You're here, and the golden house wants to show you everything. A warm breeze rustles through hidden doors. You take a breath. This is only the beginning. You keep walking, the marble beneath your feet shifting from cool white to a soft rose hue, as though the palace itself is blushing under your gaze. The deeper you move into Nero's domus aurea, the more you feel the weight of what it took to build such a dream. Not just gold and gems and silk, no, this place consumed whole lives. You picture an army of laborers carving, hauling, sweating, and probably questioning every life decision that landed them under Rome's most dramatic employer. Because yes, Nero wanted a palace, but he insisted on a world wrapped around his whims. The true, mainstream historical fact: this complex sprawled across more than 200 acres at its peak. 200 acres. That's less home sweet home and more oops. I bought a city. You wander through a long gallery where massive scaffolding once stood. Imagine thousands of workers, engineers planning ambitious structures, architects sketching innovations, plasterers smoothing endless walls, and enslaved people bearing the literal weight of imperial ambition. Historians still argue whether slaves did most of the work or if highly paid craftsmen dominated. But either way, Nero never lifted a chisel unless it was for a dramatic flourish. You hear the distant trickle of water and follow it. It leads you to a half-lit chamber where a series of bronze pipes catch torchlight like serpents. This palace was a test bed for hydraulic experiments, fountains that danced, waterfalls pouring from ceilings, and yes, murmurs of a secret mechanism that once made entire sections of the palace rotate. Fringe enthusiasts swear Nero built proto-hydraulic lifts to move rooms like stage sets. The thought of ancient Roman stagecraft rewriting the architecture itself makes you pause. Either Nero was an engineering visionary or Rome's most expensive theater kid. You pause by a massive fresco, vines curling around mythic figures, leaves shimmering with what must be crushed malachite and even powdered semi-precious stones. You can almost smell the wet plaster as artists rush to finish before it dried. Fresco painting is a race against time. One wrong brush stroke, and you're starting over. You imagine a painter sighing as Nero walked by, suggesting something whimsical like, "What if Apollo had a chihuahua?" Don't worry, no ancient chihuahuas appear, but you can definitely feel that energy. Stepping into yet another hall, honestly, it's starting to feel like this place has more hallways than logic. You sense the clever planning. Beneath the decadence, skylights ranged to simulate daylight even underground. Curved walls designed to guide breezes. The palace once included its own artificial lake, stocked with fish imported from across the empire. Because why just own the world when you can summon it to your door? And just to flex harder, Nero built a colossal bronze statue of himself as the sun standing nearby, roughly 100 feet tall. The message wasn't subtle. Rome revolved around him. And yet, there's a strange tenderness to the craftsmanship. You run your hand across the edge of a column that feels too perfect to be seen only by emperors. Maybe some architect loved the work, believed they were constructing something divine. Historians still argue whether Nero's megalomania masked a genuine desire to gift beauty to Rome, or whether he simply bulldozed the city to build his own playground. It's probably a yes, and there's a low hum behind the walls. Machinery, echoes, or maybe just the memory of too many cogs turning literally and metaphorically. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the quiet complaints of a foreman muttering, "He wants a waterfall that smells like cinnamon." Seriously, you breathe the cool underground air. The Golden House wasn't just built, it was forced into existence. A fantasy pinned to the earth by unimaginable effort, and you're still only scratching its gilded surface. Your path curves into a chamber where the walls shimmer like captured sunsets. Here, Nero demanded surfaces that didn't just reflect light, they devoured it and sent it back transformed. You reach out and your fingers hover inches from a fresco so vivid you're half convinced. The painted grapevines will rustle if you breathe too hard. The plaster carries the faint mineral tang of ancient pigments, lapis lazuli blues that once cost more than entire villas, cinnabar reds sourced from mercury-rich ore, and gold leaf so thin it quivers at the sigh of your passing. The mainstream historical fact hits you. Domus Aurea's name wasn't metaphorical. Portions of these very walls were coated in real gold, enough to make modern bankers faint dramatically. Nero didn't believe in subtlety if the palace wasn't gleaming like Apollo's favorite mirror. What was the point? You drift under a ceiling mosaic that imitates a star-studded night sky. Tiny tesserae, each no larger than a fingernail, capture torchlight and twinkle back. This is where artisans became magicians. They embedded seashells into plaster to bounce stray glimmers, and used marble dust to make surfaces glow softly, like moonlight on water. And here's a quirky tidbit whispered in fringe circles. Some say the paint binders included powdered pearls, because apparently extra was the baseline requirement. Historians still argue whether these so-called mirror rooms were polished to such a gleam that guests saw themselves constantly drinking, laughing, maybe regretting their toga choices as a not-so-subtle reminder that Nero watched all things. Selfie culture, but make it imperial paranoia. Perfumed vents hide behind decorative panels. You lean close and catch a waft of something floral, rose, lavender, and also, is that freshly baked bread again? Whoever managed scents here really loved a carb theme. The Golden House allegedly released different aromas for different events. Want to feel like a god? Here, inhale immortality. Want to feel at home? Here's brioche. A servant glides past holding a bronze lantern, and the walls flicker with unexpected movement. Painted satyrs seem to dance in the shifting glow. You notice details you missed at first glance. A tiny smirk on a nymph's face. Grapes dripping juice in a scene that hasn't breathed for nearly 2,000 years. These spaces weren't static. They were meant to trick the eye, to make myth look alive, to blur the line between reality and the emperor's idealized fantasy realm. You find yourself in a narrow room lined entirely with sheets of gleaming mica, an ancient version of a hall of mirrors. Even the floor reflects you back, slightly warped. It's a gentle reminder that in Nero's palace, the world bends for spectacle. You step carefully. The visual effect feels like walking atop a glass lake poised to shatter. Some scholars think these shimmering surfaces helped amplify lamplight, creating a soft glow with fewer flames. Others argue Nero simply wanted guests constantly dazzled, perhaps too dazzled to notice the politics simmering around them. And somewhere between those theories sits a craftsman who once polished these stones, probably muttering, if he asks for diamonds next, I'm switching careers. You pause before a doorway framed in ornately carved stucco. A painted peacock fans tail feathers so iridescent they seem dusted with real jewels. The Romans adored peacocks, Nero especially, because why worship quietly when a bird can scream your glory across the courtyard? One rumor claims he kept a special peacock portraitist on retainer, though historians still argue whether that's artistic devotion or ancient tabloid exaggeration. Take a slow breath. The air here hums with trapped luxury. Centuries buried beneath earth and ruins couldn't suffocate the arrogance, and artistry soaked into every square inch. These walls once spoke of a world where beauty was power, and power wanted to shine forever. The torch sputters behind you, and for a moment, the palace feels alive again. Your stomach growls at exactly the wrong time. Because, as fate would have it, you've wandered into Nero's legendary banquet hall, an arena not just for eating, but for spectacle. The floor stretches out like a mosaic map of indulgence, each tile glimmering with color and stories of gods who probably never counted calories. The ceiling here once revolved, yes, really powered by hidden machinery so guests could lie back and gaze at shifting constellations, while stuffing themselves with delicacies. Talk about dinner and a show. Michelin stars would have fainted on the spot. The mainstream historical fact, Roman elite dining meant reclining on couches, arranged around low tables, symbolic of sophistication and leisure. You settle awkwardly onto a plush cushion, trying not to think about how your ancient etiquette score is likely 0. Across the hall, musicians pluck on lyres, creating soft cascades of sound. Somewhere, a flute pierces the music, playful and teasing, like a waiter recommending the most expensive item on the menu. Repeatedly, platters arrive, and each one is a dare. Flamingo tongues marinated in spices, peacock brains served in silver shells. Delicacies meant to prove chefs could out-absurd reality. And here's tonight's quirky tidbit. Some fringe accounts claim Nero once demanded dishes, arranged by color gradients, like a rainbow that wanted to be eaten. You watch as slaves rush to refill goblets with wine older than most empires, the sweet aroma rising like a spell. Historians still argue whether Nero's dramatic dining was pure decadence or calculated diplomacy and edible flex showing allies and enemies alike that Rome's resources were limitless, because nothing says political stability like dessert shaped into mythological creatures, right? Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. Curtains are drawn open and performers step forward, actors in masks representing gods, heroes, and occasionally, Nero himself starring as Nero. Subtlety? We don't know her. You can't help but smirk as a dancer twirls with exaggerated enthusiasm, clearly terrified to appear anything less than ecstatic in front of the emperor. One performer nearly slips on a grape. You both catch your breath. He recovers with flair. Crisis averted. Comedy gold. Cue polite applause. Then, as if guided by invisible stagehands. A hidden panel in the wall slides open. A fountain erupts not water, but wine. The crowd gasps, and you realize you are now living inside the world's most chaotic vineyard commercial. You take another sip, and the room spins just from the spectacle, you swear. Definitely the spectacle. A senator nearby whispers something about the cost of all this. His companion elbows him sharply because, complaining about imperial excess while reclining on velvet. Cushions in the emperor's palace is a bold retirement. Plan. A slave approaches with a silver tray holding a tiny pastry shaped like a phoenix. Symbol of rebirth, you ask. The server shrugs. He's just the messenger of carbs. You take a bite. It tastes like honey, figs, and a hint of I should not know how expensive this is. The walls suddenly flood with floating petals, soft and fragrant, drifting down in pastel showers. For a moment, the entire banquet hall looks like spring incarnate. But you remember the rumor. Once, the petals supposedly fell too thickly and someone suffocated under the beauty. You tuck your face away just in case. Beauty, as Nero liked to say, was worth risks. You prefer your risks unrelated to inhaling roses. The hall brims with laughter, music, gluttony, a carnival of senses curated for maximum awe. Yet beneath the indulgence, you feel the quiet tension of eyes always watching. Power demands applause. All night, you lean back, letting the cushions swallow you. If decadence were a person, this would be its living room. You rise from the banquet, wiping stray petals from your hair, and the air shifts as you enter a quiet corridor. The laughter fades behind you. Ahead, the private world of an emperor whose passions were, let's say, uniquely curated. Nero's bedroom chambers are not merely places to sleep. They're stages for fantasies, insecurities, and the peculiar hobbies of a man who believed he was part god, part rock star, and part misunderstood theater prodigy. You tread softly, because these rooms once witnessed the unfiltered version of Nero, the one no senator dared mention. Out loud. First, a mainstream historical anchor, Nero indulged deeply in performance arts. Not just attending plays, performing in them, singing, acting, even playing instruments for crowds who definitely cheered freely and not at all out of fear for their property values. Here, in these chambers, Nero practiced tirelessly before forcing Rome's elite to attend, smiling like they enjoyed every moment. One whispered joke says senators developed world-class fake enthusiasm long before modern customer service. You pass through a curved archway into a room draped with silk panels dyed Tyrian purple, the shade reserved for emperors, so saturated it still seems wet with power. The walls show Apollo, again Nero's favorite divine alter ego, strumming a lyre while nymphs swoon with what looks like contractual enthusiasm. The candles flicker, and you catch yourself humming along to the silent fresco, because there's music in the paint if you listen closely. Now for the quirky tidbit. Nero kept a rotating ensemble of exotic pets, each more questionable than the last. Peacocks strutting indoors, normal by his standards, but rumor claims he once attempted to teach a parrot to critique poetry, just to have someone honest around. You try not to imagine the bird heckling him during rehearsal. Too nasal, emperor. Historians still argue whether Nero's most intimate relationships were fueled by genuine longing or by theatrical impulse. He famously took on stage roles portraying doomed lovers, and occasionally let the tragedy spill into real life. You wander into a smaller chamber where the marble tiles form swirling patterns, hypnotic and dizzying, as though urging you to forget what's outside these walls. On a pedestal rests a bronze hand mirror so polished that you see yourself in eerie clarity, as though the palace wants you to become part of its cast. A breeze follows you next, leading into a bathing suite that smells faintly of jasmine. Here, heated pools once shimmered under lamplight, rippling like molten glass. Slaves poured oils infused with herbs while musicians softened the silence. Roman baths were already luxurious, but Nero pushed even relaxation into spectacle. If he could add special effects, steam clouds sculpting mythic shapes, he would dot at the center. You find an oddity, a circular platform with remnants of a mechanism underneath. Some fringe researchers claim Nero experimented with rotating beds because why merely lounge? When you can pirouette horizontally, you picture a half-asleep emperor spinning like a sleepy kebab and suppress a laugh that echoes too loudly. There are scrolls stacked neatly in a corner, poetry Nero wrote himself. Most likely odes to how amazing Nero found Nero. You resist reading aloud. The walls here already have enough ego absorbed into them. And yet, beneath the extravagance, a subtle loneliness lingers. What happens when everyone applauds because they must? When love is performed more convincingly than any play? You sense the emptiness that voices can't fill, even when they praise you. An emperor surrounded by beauty, yet terrified the applause might stop. You linger in the doorway, glancing back one last time. Silk stirs, petals rest on cushions, a lyre waits in quiet expectation. Nero's passions made rooms dance, but once the music stopped, silence knew too much, leaving the hush of Nero's private chambers. You step into air that feels open, damp, and alive. The Golden House isn't just a palace, it's an ecosystem. Before you stretches an indoor garden so elaborate that nature itself might file a copyright claim. This wasn't just landscaping. It was Nero insisting he could improve on Earth's original design. Trees, fountains, grottos, and artificial streams all wrapped up under engineered vaults that once channeled sunlight like obedient pets. A firm historical fact, Domus Aurea included massive gardens and an artificial lake at its core, sprawling across the area later transformed into the Colosseum. You pause, realizing you're strolling through the childhood home of future gladiators. Though tonight, the lions are mercifully off duty. You brush your hands across glossy leaves, dew clinging to your fingertips. These gardens were curated like a traveling zoo of botany plants gathered from the vast empire. A statement that Rome could own climates. The path beneath you shifts from mosaics to soft crushed shells that crunch with delicate pops, guiding your steps past a cluster of citrus trees that definitely don't belong underground. Yet here they are, thriving under Roman ingenuity that piped in light through clever openings, an ancient version of a luxury greenhouse. You reach a fountain crowned with marble dolphins leaping mid-arc, water bubbling from their open mouths. Engineers designed channels so precise that water not only refreshed the room, but cooled it during scorching summers. Historians still argue whether the cooling system used hidden aqueduct connections or some early form of air conditioning driven by water flow, but either way, the effect remains. A surprising chill kisses your neck. Then comes the quirky delight, exotic birds preening from gilded perches. Peacocks, of course, Nero's go-to glamour birds, but also parrots and even a rumor-soaked claim, cranes, trained to dance on cue. Fringe accounts insist that Nero timed these birds to join musical performances, adding feathered choreography to his already over-the-top soirees. One parrot squawks at you now, sounding like it's critiquing your sandals. You shrug. Fashion wasn't your focus tonight. The path turns, and suddenly you're within a grotto carved into the wall. Torches flicker across mineral-streaked stone. A waterfall flows over a sculpted satyr's head, splashing into a pool so clear you see your reflection waver like a dream questioning itself. Cool mist settles around you, carrying the faint sweetness of imported flowers. For a sleepier vibe, you imagine this as the world's fanciest humidifier, Nero making even the air perform. You pause at a bridge arching over a gentle stream populated with lazy koi. Except Roman koi weren't a thing. These are Mediterranean fish, probably wondering why their commute now involves marble architecture. The air fills with quiet birdsong, which you suspect is less nature and more imperial playlist. A servant once cranked a hidden mechanism to make metal pipes produce trilling notes. A water-powered music system that feels like a Renaissance invention, time-traveled early just to flex. Above the grotto, a skylight reveals moonlight trickling through an opening, illuminating creeping vines. Nature and engineering dance here, showing off like a couple that refuses to admit they rehearsed. Historians still argue whether Nero saw himself as a curator of paradise, or was simply building a playground too expensive to exist. Some say he imagined Rome as a living stage, every tree a prop, every stream applause. Others believe he genuinely wanted to gift citizens a lush oasis, after they appreciated him properly, of course. A soft breeze whispers past your ears, some hidden vent coaxing air in the exact direction Nero preferred. You close your eyes. Water, birds, leaves, all of it blends into a calming symphony. For a moment, the emperor's peculiar passions feel almost peaceful. But the garden's beauty holds a subtle tension. Everything is perfect, because it must be. You continue along the winding path, the air smelling like sleep and secrets. There's more wonder waiting. This palace does not know restraint. The garden path narrows, and the sounds of water fade into the gentle scrape of sandals against marble. Ahead, torchlight spills across a colonnade that opens into Nero's creative heart, a sanctuary for artistry, performance, and unfiltered self-expression. If the banquet hall was a theater of appetite, this wing is a gallery of ego. You step through an archway alive with mosaics portraying masks of comedy and tragedy, their mouths frozen mid-emotion, forever auditioning for your attention. The mainstream historical fact lands quickly. Nero fancied himself a patron of the arts, music, sculpture, poetry, theater. He hosted competitions where he himself was, shockingly, always the star performer. Roman elites had to sit, clap, and pretend they weren't slowly dying inside as he belted out dramatic ballads, or acted in long tragedies that made 9-hour movies seem mercifully short. Here, you notice a raised platform dusted with gold, his private rehearsal stage. A discarded plectrum lies near your feet, evidence that practicing divinity can be exhausting. Your gaze drifts to artisans at work, ghosts of memory, but easy to imagine. Tile workers kneel before vast mosaic floors, placing tesserae one by one like tiny, colorful secrets. Fresco painters rush to capture mythological scenes before plaster dries. Sculptors coax faces out of marble, probably hoping the emperor doesn't decide his nose should be more heroic mid-carving. Their creativity shaped rooms into dreams, even as their livelihoods depended on never disappointing the most sensitive critic in Rome. Historians still argue whether Nero genuinely nurtured talent, or simply used artists as props in his personal show. One scholar quipped that Nero was a musician trapped in an emperor's job, which would be funny if the job didn't include armies and tax policies. You pass a door where laughter once spilled out. Inside is a miniature amphitheater designed for intimate performances. Cushions arranged in a semicircle invite you to recline and watch masked actors pantomime epic tales. Under shifting lantern light, imagine a late-night improv troupe, but if the audience's reactions determined national security. A flute leans against the stage, its mouthpiece worn from anxious performers blowing maybe a little too hard. Now for a deliciously quirky tidbit. Fringe sources claim Nero occasionally judged art contests, where athletes, painters, and poets competed simultaneously, some panting from sprints while others presented tragedies. The final awards allegedly included wreaths of laurel dipped in yes perfume. Because if you're going to win, you should smell like triumph. As you wander deeper, you find a workshop dedicated to masks, clay, leather, and brightly pigmented plaster form expressions ranging from heroic bravado to dramatic despair. You try one on a stern king with curled beard, and immediately understand the thrill of becoming someone larger than life. Then you imagine Nero selecting masks for his shows, too normal, too emotional, too subtle. Ah, this one says I'm better than Zeus. Perfect. You put the mask away before the ego rubs off. The walls here softly echo music long gone. The acoustics were engineered to flatter voices, bouncing sound like a supportive friend saying, "Yes, you are amazing." Nero allegedly commanded everyone to remain until his performances ended, even if nature desperately called. Some aristocrats fainted rather than risk offending the emperor by sneaking out. Picture a modern stadium concert where the exits lock until the headliner feels adored enough. There's a warmth in this place, though. Art flourished under imperial resources. Craftsmen achieved feats that still stun archaeologists. Maybe some adored this mad encouragement, feeling their work mattered in a world normally reserved for swords and politics. Maybe others prayed for a day off. You look up. A grand mosaic depicts Apollo guiding a radiant chariot, Nero's aspiration immortalized in stone. Yet a small tile in the corner seems out of place, a donkey wearing a wreath. You grin. Even ancient artisans slipped in jokes. The torches flicker, and the palace exhales. Creativity, control, obsession, they share a pulse here. You step away quietly, as if leaving a rehearsal still in progress. Art, like power, demands an audience. Your breath catches when the lesson shifts. Cleopatra now gestures for you to follow her toward a shadowed alcove near the back of the hall. Only when your eyes adjust do you notice the drapery embroidered with wings, royal hawk to the right, regal vulture to the left, guardians of Upper and Lower Egypt. This is the quiet heart of her school. She whispers the curriculum emperors pretend they don't need until it is too late. Here, one learns the art of keeping loyalty alive. Cleopatra lowers her voice, and the room suddenly feels intimate, conspiratorial. Every ruler imagines loyalty is given, she says. But I tell you, loyalty is cultivated. A ruler's charm doesn't end at winning hearts. It must keep them from wandering. She reaches out, lifts a tablet of wax, and smooths it with a metal stylus. When someone serves you, she continues, record their deeds. Celebrate them in public. Correct them only where shadows fall. She does not mean shadows as in darkness, she means privacy. You see this in the way she taps her stylus. Discretion secures devotion. Public humiliation breeds resentment. Private correction preserves pride. She invites you to practice. A line of imagined advisors stands before you. A general who won the day but exceeded your orders. A scholar whose brilliance masks a quick temper. A treasurer tempted by the glimmer of coins. Cleopatra teaches you the phrase, "You honor me when you honor this throne." It disciplines without diminishing. You repeat it softly, and she nods. Then comes the harder part, knowing when loyalty is gone. Cleopatra's smile dims. She tilts a small oil lamp toward you, letting its flame flicker reflections across her face. What do you do when trust has cracked? She asks. You hesitate, unsure. Perhaps punishment, exile? She shakes her head gently. You replace devotion with dependence. If someone cannot love you, ensure they need you. She shows you a tiny model boat painted with gold leaf. Remember Caesar's visit? Rome needed grain. I gave Rome grain. They need, therefore they obey. There's no cruelty in her tone, just strategy sharpened into survival. The charm school does not pretend the world is kind. A musician plucks a lyre, drawing your attention toward an inner circle where Cleopatra's closest confidants gather. They are the ones she has tested over years. A priestess who interprets dreams. An architect who can erect a fortress from sand. A diplomat whose silence has saved more lives than any sword. The queen's gaze lingers on each face with a softness you rarely see. This is trust earned. She turns back to you. Remember this, affection is fickle. Gratitude fades. But if people believe you remember them, see them, value them, your empire becomes their home. You take another step into the alcove. The air smells faintly of lotus and beeswax. Cleopatra hands you a feather quill, symbol of Mot, goddess of truth and balance. Your charm, she reminds you, must be both sweet and severe. A garden must be watered and weeded. You write a single name upon the wax tablet, a friend from earlier lessons. A promising ally, and beside it, a tiny star. Cleopatra approves. Reward the loyal before you punish the disloyal, she murmurs. Empires thrive on encouragement. A door opens on the far side of the alcove. You glimpse a balcony overlooking the harbor, ships moving like chess pieces against the blue. Cleopatra's eyes gleam as she gestures forward. This is the horizon of your power, she whispers. Hold loyalty close, and that horizon expands forever. Let it slip and the sea will swallow everything. She places your hand over your heart. In every triumph, remember those who lifted you. In every fear, reassure before you restrain. You feel taller, sharper. Not just a ruler in training, you are becoming a magnet, a center of gravity. Emperors will orbit you because they want to. Cleopatra smiles again. And the lesson ends not with applause, but with a promise. The world follows those who know how to cherish followers. Cleopatra walks beside you now as gilded doors swing open, revealing an entirely new wing of her charm school, the theater of delight, where a ruler's pleasures become propaganda. Perfume drifts like a lure, and warm laughter ripples from marble chambers glowing with lamplight. You blink at the sudden glitter of it all. The lesson here is deliciously simple. Adore life so vividly that others long to adore you, too. Silken curtains lift as if by magic, revealing a banquet table shaped like the curve of the moon. Pearls, actual pearls, rest in bowls of citrus to prevent them from losing their shine. Cleopatra taps one with a fingernail. Beauty is a message, she whispers. If you live richly, others assume you must be right. She is not wrong. History's boldest rulers often dazzled crowds into forgetting their doubts. A servant pours wine from a jug sculpted like the Nile's god happy, belly round and smiling. Cleopatra takes a cup but only sips. Never be the drunkest person in the room, she tells you. But make sure the room believes you're having the most fun. You file that away. It feels like a trick every influencer would tattoo on their ring finger. Then she raises a brow and guides you toward a balcony overlooking torches, flickering around an outdoor stage. Tonight, she says, you will not watch. You will participate, and suddenly, a troupe of dancers appears, sequins flashing like small galaxies. They toss you a ribbon red, the color of royal daring. You stammer something about not being a performer, but Cleopatra just laughs. Rulers don't perform, she says. They transform a room by entering it. The dancers spin around you, coaxing you into a rhythm that is more confidence than choreography. When you exhale and let yourself sway, applause erupts. For a moment you feel unstoppable, infectious charm made flesh. Cleopatra nods approvingly. See? When you give joy, joy follows. She takes your hand again, leading you deeper behind the scenes. A massive prop lotus opens on gears, revealing the queen's private showcase, costumes from her grandest stunts. Here lies her shimmering fish-scale cape from that famous night she arrived rolled out of a carpet. To meet Julius Caesar, yes, that really happened. Though historians still argue whether it was a political masterstroke or the world's earliest recorded surprise entrance. A jeweled headdress catches your eye, gold cobras coiling around a tiny basket. Cleopatra grins at your confusion. Ah yes, for the festival when we pretended the gods delivered breakfast. And there on the table, a replica of her giant perfume-filled barge, the one that sailed to meet Mark Antony, with scented sails so thick the harbor smelled like roses for days. That's your quirky tidbit. Cleopatra weaponized aromatherapy. She leans closer, speaking softer. Spectacle is not waste. It is a seed planted in memory. She traces a fingertip along a mosaic, showing Alexander the Great crowned by Nike. Even legends needed lighting. A harp begins to play. Again notes that ripple like water under moonlight. Cleopatra moves with it, slow and serene. You watch how every gesture, even the way she breathes, commands attention without ever demanding it. That's the secret. Effortless allure is mostly effort, polished until it disappears. You feel a tingle of pride. You're learning. You're glowing a little. Cleopatra notices, eyes twinkling. Charm is influence wrapped in delight, she says. Rulers must be irresistible. Even when ruling is hard. Suddenly she claps her hands. The music softens. The dancers bow their farewell. She whispers, one more lesson remains, my imperial apprentice. The hardest, the most dangerous. Her expression turns thoughtful as if charm, for all its brightness, casts a long shadow. You straighten your posture, already sensing the shift. If pleasures build loyalty, then the final test might be what happens when pleasure fails. Cleopatra leads you toward a quiet archway and lit, unadorned. Beyond it lies the one skill all rulers secretly fear needing. You step across the threshold. Word count, 642 awaiting continue. Ban ka noi, continue et ka noi, absolutely, this is section 10. Followed seamlessly by the 300-word wind down. Exactly as specified. Section 10. The quiet archway swallows you, and the revelry falls away like a discarded mask. Cleopatra's sandals whisper against the floor as she guides you into a chamber far more solemn than any you've seen tonight. The ceiling here is painted with night, stars meticulously set in lapis skies, tiny silver crescents glinting like the crowns of distant queens. This is where charm meets its final test. Disaster. Cleopatra stands before you, hands folded. Every emperor, she says, must learn how to survive the moment when applause dies. There is no sarcasm in her voice now, only hard-earned truth. Her reign itself has become a constant lesson in resilience. Rome's storms always gathering, its ambitions crashing like waves against Egypt's fragile shore. She places a scroll into your hands. It bears a list of misfortunes, famine, flood, fickle allies, betrayal, the usual party tricks of history. She taps a single line, when fortune turns. Charm when you are adored is easy, she murmurs. Charm when the world doubts you. That is leadership. You follow her gaze to a display of objects once used in crisis, rationed tokens from years. When the Nile flooded to little, propaganda coins stamped with her son Caesarion's face to reassure the public. Their future was secure, and, surprisingly, a tiny crocodile brooch. She smirks at your raised eyebrows. I once declared a crocodile a sacred symbol of prosperous waters, she says. People cheered. They love any excuse to hope. Quirky tidbit, crocodile cult, who knew? She gestures to a throne not gold but plain ebony. Sit, she instructs. Not as a conqueror. As a caretaker, you lower yourself, and suddenly the room feels heavier. Advisors bow. Messengers kneel. Cleopatra stands at your side, whispering the lines rulers use when lightning strikes their empire. We will rebuild. We endure. Stand with me. Not grand promises, shared struggle. Some historians still argue whether Cleopatra was stubbornly loyal to Egypt or simply desperate to preserve her throne. But here you sense something deeper. Ruling wasn't her luxury. It was her burden. She shows you how to hold grief without letting it devour the room. How to let fear sharpen your instincts while softening your tone. How to convince others they are heroes in the same story. This, she says, is how an empire survives, not through intimidation or indulgence, but through connection. Her hand touches your shoulder, warm and steady. Charm isn't what you have, it's what you give. You rise from the ebony throne, changed, not sparkling like in the theater, nor glittering like at the banquet, but grounded, unshakable. You are no longer just learning to rule. You are learning to remain. Cleopatra smiles, pride flickering like a votive candle. The palace of peculiar passions, she says, echoing the adventure you've lived tonight, is not about indulgence. It is about influence. It is about the hearts that choose to beat beside yours. She walks you back into the open air. The palace glows behind you. Its mosaic halls and perfumed sails and secret alcoves whispering all you have learned. The sea sighs against the harbor stones. Torches shimmer in the breeze. Cleopatra lifts her chin toward the dawn, now beginning to stain the horizon. Go on, she tells you. Rule well. And remember, charm is your kindest blade. The night fades. The lessons glow inside you. The world awaits. Asterisk as you step away from Cleopatra's palace. The marble edges soften. The torches blur into slow-moving fireflies, and every sound grows quieter. Gentler, as if Egypt itself is rocking into sleep. Take a deep breath. Feel the cool night air brushing across your face. The last traces of jasmine drifting like a lullaby. You carry so much now: confidence, loyalty, resilience, but none of it feels heavy. Instead, it settles like a warm cloak around your shoulders, comforting rather than commanding. Your footsteps aren't hurried anymore. Each one lands gradually, softly, as if the earth is rising to meet you halfway. The harbor's waves hush to a glide, and the moon leaves a silver path stretched across the water, the kind you could walk in your dreams. Even Cleopatra's voice, normally bright and quick, now lingers in your memory like velvet, slow, reassuring. Proud of all you've discovered tonight, let your eyelids flutter a little. Let your breathing smooth into something steady and peaceful. The palace behind you remains a glowing lighthouse of imagination. There, if you ever want to wander its halls again, explore another secret, learn another gentle truth about power and presence and charm. But for now, there is nothing you must prove. No lessons to recite. No kingdoms to steady or crowds to impress. Just a calm heart. A quiet room. A soft pillow waiting for you to melt into it. Let the stars keep watch. Let the breeze finish the story. You have ruled enough for one night.